Hi, I'm Arens, RMvlc's Victim Services Director. Happy National Crime Victims' Rights Week. This is my second video in helping you understand some of the ways that you can take up space in a courtroom if you're an advocate. One of the big things that I mentioned in the last video was that in order to be able to take up space, it's really helpful for you to know what's going on in a courtroom. It's also helpful to know this because we can impart this knowledge on our clients, or if you yourself are a survivor navigating the courtroom for the first time, it can be really overwhelming understanding who everyone is and what in the world is happening. So I'm hopeful that this short little video will give you an initial introduction to what that can look like. For most folks, interacting with the legal system is a really overwhelming process. If you're going in as a survivor or a victim of crime or as an advocate, you may never have had any interaction with the legal system before. Additionally, because survivors are not guaranteed an attorney, you don't have the same guidance through that space as a defendant might, or as the DA's office, who's made up of attorneys and advocates. So when you first walk into a courtroom, it's helpful to understand kind of who everyone is. And while all courtrooms are set up just a little bit differently, there are some things that typically happen. When you walk in, there's going to be two pretty distinct spaces in the courtroom. You have one that's on the side closest to the door, that's before the bar, which is usually kind of a short, low wall separating the front of the courtroom from the seating area, really the gallery. You, as a non-attorney, are going to sit in the gallery if you're watching court. On the other side of the bar are going to be a few tables where both the prosecution and the defense sit, and they usually sit at separate tables. Sometimes there can be like a podium or a lectern between them. There's a space for where the jury would sit if there was going to be a trial that day, for example. There's a judge who sits at the very front of the courtroom, and they're usually surrounded by their clerk or a court reporter, a bunch of individuals who work for the judge's office or for the courthouse itself, I suppose, as well. And then you have a witness box. So that's where someone who's giving testimony might sit. That's kind of the general makeup. When you walk in, you might notice that in one courtroom to another, things are flipped. Often we see the defense sits closest to the witness box and the DA's office is closest to the jury box, but that's not always true. And when you walk in, you can't always say like, oh, the defense is always on the left and the prosecution is always on the right. Also not always true. It can always be flipped. So if you're feeling a little bit lost, it's okay to walk up to the bar, again, that little wall, and ask, hey, who's the DA's office? Who's sitting where? Oftentimes the defendant isn't necessarily immediately seated at the defense table, especially if there's a hearing going on and they're needing to be brought up if they're being held in the jail, for example, or if it's a day where there's a lot on the docket, right? The list of cases that might be called is called a docket. The person might just be sitting in the courtroom. They may not actually be sitting up at that table yet. So you can always walk up and ask for clarification. Where's the DA? Who's the DA? I'm trying to find out who the DA is. And it's okay to ask questions and walk up and talk to someone. I think some other important pieces to know just about a courtroom generally is that there is an expectation that you need to be quiet and conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner. So some courtrooms will require all hats be off. Most courtrooms require that you not have your cell phone on, that you can't take pictures. And sometimes information will be posted on the doors as you walk in about whether drinks and food are allowed. So keep an eye out for those types of signages to help you better understand how you should be conducting yourself in that space. I think one last thing, since we don't have a ton of time today to talk about in courtrooms, is just understanding exactly kind of how things will proceed. So again, this can be handled in a number of different ways, but if you're going in on a day where there's a lot on that docket, you should be expecting to stay for quite a bit of time. Usually most courtrooms call people who are in custody or who are being held in jail or in prison or being brought over to the courthouse. They call those first to accommodate the sheriff office's schedule and the transportation needs that might exist in our eyes. So definitely make sure you're planning for a significant portion of your time to be spent at court if it's a docket day. And then, usually they'll call cases, they'll announce who it is, they'll, read the case number, maybe the last name of the person to try and call that case. So you should be listening for the name of the defendant, try and spot exactly who is talking to the judge right now. As an advocate, and especially if you're online, this can be really easy to miss if you're tracking your case based on the name of the survivor. Just making sure you're listening for the name of the defendant and being really aware and paying attention, because those types of things can move really quickly, especially if it's a quick court case or a quick hearing that day. I hope that these tips are really helpful for you as you begin navigating a courtroom space and getting a bit more familiar with who everyone is and what that looks like. We are certainly here to help if you ever need more information, or if you're feeling a little bit lost, feel free to give us a call and reach out to our office. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Thanks, everyone.